everybody. This is Jenny with my Amulet Podcast. I'm so excited for my guest today.
I am so grateful to be here.
No, I'm so grateful that you're here. I'm so grateful that we connected because this is like I'm like a kid that's going to Disneyland. This is so cool and interesting and exciting, and I have a million questions for you. So let's just get started.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the history of tarot.
So it's so interesting because it does have, even in and of itself, it has quite a mysterious history where there's various sources of like when did it exactly begin, and the most common, I guess, like history that I've found and researched is like the 1400s, and it started as a like an Italian playing game is when we kind of knew of it in Western culture, but there's ties all the way back to Egypt as divination tools that inspired that Tarot-ichi, the Italian like playing card game, and from that. It kind of people started to use it to then fortune tell of kind of like, oh, okay, what does this mean for the future? And then it went through like a path to the Marseille deck in France shortly after that, and then the Order of the Golden Dawn is kind of the I guess like the biggest influencers that we know of for tarot that created the Smith Rider-Waite deck, and that's the one that if you see tarot, if you even like Google a tarot card in the internet,
Right.
usually the Smith Rider-Waite imagery will come up. It's the most famous, the most well-known, and still for sale today. And the imagery is kind of like the most iconic, and a lot of decks, including my own deck, are derived from the archetypes and the images of the 78 cards in the Smith Rider-Waite. But the history of it is interesting because I think many people kind of took the idea of visual divination through the cards and adapted it. And and we're seeing that like still of kind of how that's being celebrated, how it's being evolved. And I love that so many people are now able to create their own decks when that was way harder back then, like with printing presses and like the way that it even came about in production. And now a lot of smaller artists, like readers like myself, are able to kind of take their own experience through reading and make that into a divination tool that's custom to their journey.
Right. That's so interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I tried looking into it a little bit, and there's like such a wealth of information.
Yeah.
But I did see what you just mentioned, that it stops at like the 1400s.
Yeah.
Like it got a little
Yeah,
muddy.
it gets weird, right? And people say like
Right.
it goes back further than that to Egypt, and there's a lot of mystery around it because I think that
Right.
there was this idea of keeping it like first of all there was people were persecuted for fortune telling throughout the years. There's the whole going back into like the persecution of witches, but there was also almost like the keeping it secret, which made it a little bit taboo. And I think that
Right.
that's something we still deal with today of like, oh, does that mean it's evil? Does it mean it's dark? So there are gaps in the history of kind of, I think a lot of things were told back then, like by passing it down through lineage, word of mouth versus written record. So yeah, from what I have studied, from what I understand, it's traceable exactly what you found back to like the 1400s, but it's a little bit mysterious going back further than that.
Right. But I can totally see why these cards with that playing set would lend itself to kind of people saying, "Hey, I wonder what this means,"
Yeah.
and how it could evolve into what it is today.
Yeah,
That's so
totally.
interesting, so cool. Um, it from what I saw, it seems like every culture has its own form of fortune telling.
Yeah.
What do you think sets tarot apart from all these other systems, for lack of a better word?
Yeah, I think that it's very visual. So that's the first thing. And I think across culture, across language, we are like such visual creatures as humans. And I think that it's something there's something that's easy to grasp and learn. And that's usually the first part of reading that people access. Like when I was young, I always talk about like I just kind of was like, what is this card? What do I see? What does it make me feel? Was how I learned to read more or less. And then there's many layers of each card in terms of like numerology, astrology, Kabbalistic tie-ins. Could go into all of that for forever. But I think that the kind of unifying piece of tarot is that there is an element of accessibility through the visual images. And even when people are learning different divination tools, whether it's like working with pendulums, whether it's working with like crystal ball, there are other visual aspects, but the tarot has so many touch points that I think give us, like, even if you don't know what that card means from a guidebook, you're like, oh, I see like Queen of Cups. I see this woman. I see water flowing. It feels very feminine. It feels open. It feels warm. So it makes it feel a little less like, I don't know what I'm doing, because there are things to work with, even
Right.
from like the complete novice's eye.
Right. Yeah, because
Yeah.
I guess we can all, in a way, analyze symbols.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yes. How? At what age did you start?
It was around like I think 11. I remember being
Oh,
in grade school. Yeah,
wow.
I always was really drawn to the metaphysical, like back then, because I'm like an elder millennial, so like late 80s, early 90s, it wasn't even called metaphysical or like wellness and healing the way that it is today. It was like the occult section,
Right. It
and it was
wasn't
kind of,
even new age
yeah, it
yet.
wasn't even new age, and it was
Yeah.
kind of scary. Like you would go into a bookstore, it'd be like the back corner, and it was like occult, and I was always drawn to that, which probably freaked my poor mother out, because it's not something, I meet a lot of people that they're like, oh, I'm a third generation medium, or like my mom introduced me to this, and that's not the case at all for me. Like it was like I came from this very small rural Amish area of Pennsylvania, no experience in my family with it, but there was something in me that was always drawn to that. So I would save my allowance and I would buy like astrology books. And I remember being like 10, 11 years old was the first time I got a tarot deck at Barnes and Noble in this like strip mall in the middle of Pennsylvania. And my mom, I remember her looking at it because she would always look at what I wanted to buy. And I think in her mind was like, okay, as long as it's not like satanic or like,
Right.
and she's like, I guess, I don't know why you want this stuff, but I guess, and was open-minded enough to let me explore it. So at that point I was very like self-taught. And as I was explaining in terms of like the visuals of the cards, I didn't really study the guidebook at first. It was kind of, I would pull cards and be like, how does this make me feel? What's in this image? And to this day, there are certain things that I think back of like as a child, what my perception of the card was. And there's roots to that. But then there are things that have changed and what I've learned as I kind of studied it as an adult, and went deeper
Right.
into different layers and meanings of the cards.
That's so cool, though, that you went into it just by intuition.
Yeah.
And you could read the cards just through your intuition.
I feel like, and I always tell people it's a great way to learn is like through the mind of a child. It's similar to language, how like, your children are like multilingual, and it's kind of like when you learn as a child, you don't have the rigidity of like, am I right or wrong? It has to be this way. You're just kind of playing with it and picking it up. And so the parts of the way that I learned then were much easier than the way that a lot of people are like, okay, I have to memorize the guidebook, or like this has X plus Y equals Z in the meaning of this. So there is something that is very like pure and intuitive just in the way children learn in general. So I think and when I teach tarot, I kind of teach from that aspect of like how I originally learned myself. And I would do things like little playing card games with my best friend. If we would play like card games like War, and then like have to defend like why King of Swords would be like King of Wands, or like, whatever card came up, like this is why this card is more powerful. And it was a cool way to learn because it is very subjective, but it was going into like those cards brought up for me versus like oh, this is the hard and set black and white meaning of something.
Right.
Yeah.
That's so cool because yeah, I'm thinking, like, I'm trying to think back to, my first experience with a deck of cards playing, of course. Like, I remember my grandfather trying to teach, I think he was Bridge. He was trying to teach me.
Yeah.
And the images are very captivating.
Yeah.
And you can just kind of like let your imagination go.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting that that's such a good point, because sometimes, like, as adults, we try to look at things in such a rigid way.
Yes, like so logically. And,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but kids don't.
Yeah.
They just pick it up and run with it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I imagine that as starting this as an adult can be daunting. Like what I read about, like, what is it, the major arcana, and then I'm like, what? I get so overwhelmed. Like, wait, how many cards, and how do you know which one belongs to which? And
yes. Yeah. And that's why, like, and I do love to teach as well. I'm doing a digital course coming up in the spring, but I do like one-on-one and group courses over the past couple of years. And that's the thing I kind of like to like like break that down into a much more accessible, democratized way of learning. Because it is overwhelming when you get a guidebook and like you're saying, like how many cards, how many major and minor arcana, there's, 78 cards. And then when you read reversals, that's like 156 or whatever that times 2 is. So it can just feel like, oh, what's the point? Like I'm never going to be able to do that. What's the point? And it's actually a lot more simple than that when we come at it from a pure accessing our intuition. Because I that's how I learned, and then I picked up more data points along the way, and then I was slowly like, oh, I'm curious about like the astrological rulings, because I also like study astrology a lot as well, and then I was like, oh, I'm curious about the Kabbalistic tie-ins. So then you can kind of like pick more points up to help you have more access to what comes up first when you're reading. So it's sometimes for me, it's the numerology, sometimes it's the astrology, sometimes it's still just like the imagery of the card that I'm like, that's what I'm getting for what's coming through for the person that I'm reading for.
Do you think anybody can learn how to do this?
Oh,
Or you
yeah.
need to have like a spiritual connection?
I think some of us are more drawn to it than others, and we all have different, whether it's divination tools or different ways of accessing our intuition that come through more clearly. But I think absolutely anyone can learn how to read tarot. And I always say, like, we all have access to our like inner guidance system, access to intuition. It's just a matter of how we choose to engage with it. Like I used to, one of my first jobs, like in my former life, in this life, was I was in fashion forever. My first job was designing for Nike, and their mission statement is that they're designing for athletes, and there's an asterisk that says, if you have a body, you are an athlete. And I feel like that about intuition too.
I
It's
love
kind of,
that.
right? And it's like, yeah, if we're all athletes, it's a matter of kind of like accessing that part of our physical, our physical routine, our physical body. And I'm like, if you are a human, you have intuition. So I feel very similarly about accessing, and whether it's tarot, like I said, there's so many ways that we can work with that. I have a friend who reads runes. I have people that read, work with pendulums, and that's kind of their go-to method. Mine is obviously tarot, but I think that, yeah, we all, if we're human, we have intuition. It's just learning how to access it.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And going back to what we originally talked about, if I think almost every culture, safe to say, has some sort of
Yeah.
right. Was it the Turkish? They read coffee, right?
Oh, right. Yeah.
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 The Chinese have what is it called? Is it I Ching? Oh my God. I don't
Oh,
want to mispronounce anything.
yeah. No, I'm not familiar with that, but I know that there's a lot of like tea leaf reading, and then I've heard about like the
Right.
Turkey, like in Turkey they do the coffee grind reading. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, so it's actually very common. And
Yeah.
it makes a lot of sense because it kind of helps you address the big what if,
And I think
right?
that, like, when you're saying, can anybody do it? A lot of times we've been trained kind of like in this 3D human matrix that we live in to disconnect from
Mhm.
intuition. And that's kind of being able to work with whether it's tarot or tea leaves, like saying, okay, I want to reconnect with my inner guidance system. And how does it come through? I feel like a lot of what I do in readings is a mirror of people's own inner guidance system. And so a lot of times, yes,
Mm.
things from the future will come through. But I would definitely go on record as saying they have the ability to access that too, And
That's
so
beautiful.
yeah,
Wow,
like,
that's incredible.
and a lot of times what I'll share of and where they are at the present moment, I mean, and this is like a stranger that I've never met coming to me for a reading, and I'm like, oh, did this recently happen? They're like, oh, that's crazy. Yes, that did just happen. And like, I'm like, this is where I feel like your energy is right now. And so even what I'm seeing coming through for the future, like they have the ability to access that. And I'm really just a mirror of kind of like their own intuition. So
Wow.
it's, to me, it's always tapping into like, yes, like the universe, like, my guides that combined with their guides, but it's really just coming together to kind of put a mirror of in front of their own inner knowing and intuition.
Right.
Yeah.
Is that the same thing that we say like our gut? Is it that
Yeah.
same
I
thing?
feel like a lot of people say like it's it's a
Like your
gut
gut feeling,
feeling.
like you just
Totally.
know?
Yeah, yeah. And it's people feel it in different places. Like, and I talk to people a lot about that of determining the difference between anxiety and intuition, and like where do you feel it? Because some
Ooh,
people
that's a
do.
good one.
Yeah, because it's kind of like where in your body, how does it feel? Because a lot of times I feel like anxiety will feel it feels like jittery, it feels unsafe, whereas intuition, it can hit you, but there's a calmness to it. So whether you feel it, and you'll learn where you feel it in your body. For me, it's usually more like my heart chakra, like chest. I feel things where it feels expansive, but I'm like, whew, okay, that feels true. Whereas anxiety for me, it feels constrictive and it feels like
Yeah.
unsafe. And so and I always say, even when it's bad news with intuition, if you're like, I know I didn't get that job, or I know like, that thing's gonna fall, you're like, I know it, but you're kind of okay with it. It's not
You've
that like,
accepted it.
yes, it's there's a feeling
Yeah.
of surrender and acceptance when it's an intuitive hit versus like an anxiety feeling. Yeah.
Wow, I'm so happy that you explained that because I've wondered, like, so how do I know if this is really my gut or if I'm
Yeah.
just like freaking out or I'm nervous or whatever the case may be?
Yeah.
So that's like right on point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I mean, I remember like my grandmother, always saying like follow your gut or trust your gut. And now I catch myself saying that to my kids.
Yeah.
But then I'm like, what the heck does that mean? And I say it to people all the time. Like when they ask me
Yeah.
something, I go, you'll know what to do. Just follow your gut. What does that mean?
Yeah,
Really?
and I think that I mean, it's so true, like, that's accurate, but I think that it's funny because a lot of questions that people ask me, I'm like, "You know the answer to," and even that's cliche. It's like, "Oh, you know," and it's one of those things that's, like, it's like riding a bicycle, it's like working out. The more you work with your own, you'll know how it comes through, and it comes through differently
Right.
for all of us. Like, for me, I hear a lot of things. I have a friend who feels things a lot, like, she'll feel things like almost like Reiki energy, like
Oh,
warmth in her body
wow.
to affirm things. Like, I get a lot of things through hearing. Even when I was saying like where in your body do you feel things when something feels true? Some people it is their stomach. It's like that like solar plexus of like it's empowering because it feels true. Other people it's like heart or it depends. And as you learn where you feel it, you're like, oh, I know what that is for me. But it is something that's hard to give. Like when you're saying to your kids, like a universal way of like this is what it's gonna feel like. Like we kind of learn on our journey where to access it. And it's just providing, I think, all of the different tools and opportunities for people to play and explore and be curious about how to access it that we learn how to more clearly.
That's unbelievable. That's so interesting. Oh my goodness. Would you qualify tarot like an oracle?
So I feel like, an oracle is something that kind of gives, yeah, like that it is a form of divination and it gives guidance and and for many of us insight into future timelines. So absolutely. In terms of like, I think it's a little bit like that because there are oracle cards, which are like those like, divine guidance cards that are more open. Tarot does have more structure and it's funny because I'm quite like, I'm very feminine in appearance, but I'm quite like masculine in a lot of ways. I've navigated the world, and there's something that people either usually prefer oracle oracle cards that are more open in terms of there's not a set number, there's not a set structure of the tarot is 78 cards. There's major arcana, minor arcana, and I like a little bit of the structure to it because I feel like that's it's a mirror and a representation of how we live in the world. We live in somewhat of like this rigid matrix, but being able to access the magic within that is to me that's very tarot of like it's like here are the rules, where do they apply, where do they not. Some people never read reversals. Some people, like every tarot reader I know, reads very differently. So, like, that's a long question to like, yes, it is an oracle.
Mhm.
But I think that there's a lot of there's more structure around tarot than there are in other forms of oracles. And that can either be freeing or limiting, depend on how you view the world and how you kind of
I
navigate
see.
that. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I would see why tarot would be limiting or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Like in
like,
my brain, the way my brain works, I need structure.
yeah,
So for me, it makes complete sense
totally. Totally. Like, I
to
love
have
that.
like rules and boundaries and know like, okay, how does this thing work? Where
Yeah.
if it's just, open and no rules, I wouldn't even know.
Because I have a lot of friends that are like really powerful, like channelers and readers, and they'll only work with like oracle cards that are not the tarot. And they're like, oh, I don't mess with tarot. It feels like it's almost like they're afraid that they're gonna break the rules. Whereas I'm the type of person where I'm like,
I
show me all the
see.
rules so I can break them. So I
Right.
know what resonates, what doesn't, what feels like it's a good guidance in the system versus like I never looked at it like I have to read this way, but I was kind of like, oh, let me learn that structure that's been around for
Right.
centuries for a reason, and then see what applies and what doesn't, ways that I can revise it and make
Yeah.
it more accessible today. But it's one of those things that can actually be polarizing of like oracle cards versus tarot cards of you're either like usually in one camp or the
Or the
other.
other.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
work with oracle cards as well, but I'll normally do in readings like tarot. And then if I do on my Instagram, usually for like new moons, full moons, big astrological transits, I'll do like a pick a pile where like looking at the video and then like pick the pile that resonates the most with you visually. And in that I'll do like an oracle card as like the overview card, and then like my, you know, my tarot deck as the spread. So I work with both, but like I don't, like I said, I feel like we live in a matrix and I'm kind of like in the matrix, but not of the matrix. So I'm like, let me work with that and kind of see how it can be beneficial. But yeah, there's definitely like multiple schools of thought around that.
That's amazing. I thought it would be more clear cut.
Yeah.
I didn't realize it's, it can get so like muddy.
Yeah.
So you touched upon this a little bit, but I want to go into it a little more. How did tarot become associated with the occult?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it was taken in many directions, and historically, the biggest developers in the Western world of the tarot were this group called the Order of the Golden Dawn, and they were basically like practitioners of magic. It was very hush hush. It was like you had to be initiated in, and I think that took it into kind of the a little bit of like there's mystery around it, there's secrecy, because the occult is there's something almost like you have to that you do have to be initiated, or that there's this like underground feeling of it. And as a result of that, I think it's had that connotation for better or worse. I think that it's good that it's now becoming more in the mainstream. And there are people that are like, oh, that's, it's making it trendy. Now people aren't doing it from a place of like pure intuitive connection. But I think the more that we can provide intuitive tools to everybody, the better. Like we all need healing more than ever right now. So I think it's kind of coming out of the dark in a lot of ways. But like anything, when people say like, oh, is it a tool like of the dark, the people that are like, is it satanic? Is it negative? The way that I address that is like anything can be used for light or shadow. It's kind of like a knife can be made to make a sandwich. It can also be used to like stab someone.
That's such a good analogy.
Yeah, and like the internet, social media, like it can be used for really terrible bullying, for negative use of information, but it can also be used to connect, to like illuminate. Like look at all of the ways we've come together because of social media in the past 2 years. So I always use like the social media, like the knife analogy of there's light and shadow, and it's what do we choose to do with it? How do we access it? And tarot has been such a gift of the light and of illumination and healing in my life, and for so many people that I read for and connect with.
Right. I mean, of course, it makes sense that it would, be associated with the occult in its inception, in its beginnings. But I think the more we evolve and the more we understand energy and, even from a scientific perspective, right? Like energy can be destroyed or created.
Totally.
It's just there. All of this stuff starts to make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, 100%.
And it shouldn't be as scary as it was, 200 years ago?
Yeah. And I think it's like, if it doesn't resonate with you, like when you're talking about just like from a quantum energetic perspective, if you're like, I don't feel good about it, like then don't work with it.
Right.
Find something that does feel expansive and light energy. So yeah, I don't think it's like the end all be all for everybody. I always say that about any tool, any healing modality. If it resonates, like absolutely. If not, like leave it and find the thing that does, keep moving on your journey. Yeah.
Yeah. It's true. But that wouldn't mean that this is a terrible thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's just the way I see it. Like just because it didn't work for
you.
Oh,
totally.
It doesn't mean that now you have to demonize it.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's my opinion.
Yes. Yeah.
Not yours. You know what I mean? Like,
no, totally.
I don't want to put words in your mouth. So, what do you think people are so afraid of it?
I think that there's been a lot of societal programming, both in like mainstream culture and also like religions that have demonized accessing our intuition. Because if we're all able to do that free of government structure, free of religious structure, that puts a lot of power in like our own hands. Like if we can just access, because when people, it's funny, I had someone who was very religious once ask me at an event, like, who is this governed by, meaning the tarot? And I was like, like the same source that governs everything. Like whether you want to call that God, the universe, source, I'm like, that's where the information, I'm like, I'm just a conduit or a channel for what comes through, and it's coming through for the highest good of whoever I'm working with. Like I always do whether you want to call it a meditation, a prayer, a spell, to me, it's like, that's all like same, language around the same intention. I do like an intentional connection before every reading of bringing information through that's helpful, healing, and empowering for the person in front of me. Like anything that I can bring through for this person that's helpful, healing, and empowering. So when people are kind of like, oh, is it of the dark? Where does it come from? Like we're all, as you were saying, energetically, like from a quantum perspective, we're all connected as into this one consciousness from like God's source, the universe. And that's how I look at like what comes through, like, and tarot is just a tool that helps me personally connect to that. But I think that there has been for centuries, we've been programmed to disconnect from that unless we're told how to. Like you're allowed to do it in this way, in this structure. And that's, going back to like the witch trials, like that's what happened. A lot of people were demonized that were just midwives, like helping to birth babies, helping to heal with herbology. I'm not even talking about divination tools, but just like creating elixirs and healing tools with like, of the earth.
Which is medicine.
Right.
Yeah.
And it is medicine. And like, to me, like tarot is a form of healing and of medicine, of like the soul and of the spirit. But all of those things that we've been demonized for, of like, no, like you should not be able to access that healing. But like thinking about if we opened that up, which I do think we are in this day and age, if we open that up to all of us being able to access healing and to help one another access healing, like we'd be in such a more connected, beautiful, loving space in the world.
Right. So I have a degree in English literature, but I have a heavy background in religious studies, which is why like this to me is so exciting.
Yeah.
But I say all that to say that, in my what I have studied, religion for a long time, it was very middleman.
Yeah.
You had to, in order to access God, you have to go to church. You have to go through your priest. And even though that's great, right, to have somebody to like a physical person to go to, I don't think that should be the only way.
That's how I feel too.
Right?
Yeah. Like I think that's amazing. And for those people that resonates with and they're finding and accessing like healing and clarity, 100%. Right. But I think that like we shouldn't be demonized for being able to have that connection ourselves.
Right. To have that straight like, line that you can just pick up and go, hey.
Absolutely.
I don't need to go see someone. So I think that's super important for people who are starting on their spiritual journey, whatever that may be, to point out, that it's okay to have a direct relationship with God or the universe, whatever name you want to call it.
And I think the more we open to that, the less alone we feel, and the more that we kind of like trust this journey, and trust where we're being guided, because it does feel less isolating of like, wait, no, I am able to tap into that. And like, I'm worthy to tap into that. Like you're saying, I don't need someone else to, Yeah.
And, at the end of the day, realizing that you're not alone.
Yeah.
Right. There's always someone there, whether, whatever you want to call.
Yes.
Him, her.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. I honestly believe that. Have you ever had anything scary happen to you?
Not necessarily in a reading, but like I said, I set really clear intentions and boundaries around my space when I read for the protection of myself and whoever I'm reading, the client that I'm reading for, working for. But in terms of like, I think as I opened my own intuition, because I went through a big transition of my previous life, like as this big executive in the fashion world. I used to be the creative director of Playboy and work in, design in Manhattan. And I was a heavy drinker, heavy partier. And I think a lot of that in my 20s to early 30s was to turn off the intuition of it. Was like
you were trying to like placate it.
Yes. I was just like, I just want to be what like I'm supposed to be. Like, that's what like success, like I thought looked like. And I was like, I just want to follow this path that I told myself myself what my life was supposed to look like. And I did a lot to turn it off. And so when I had this big, dark night of the soul awakening in 2017 and came full on back into my work, then it came on strong. And so I did have some scary moments of like spirit, like things coming through. And I think it was like, I felt almost like, if anyone's ever seen the movie Ghost with Whoopi Goldberg, where it's like, oh, now it's available, when she like, how then all of a sudden she's like, now I'm hearing all this stuff. That's how I felt. Well, I was like, oh my gosh. And it did teach me boundaries, because I would have things, like I would see things, be woken up in the middle of the night. I would have messages, some for people. And now I say, like, if this is a message that I can get through to someone that will be helpful, healing, and empowering, I'll take it. But otherwise, like, I need this space to like restore my physical body, because it was coming through a lot at night. One was like a friend of my mom's, husband who had passed away. There was like messages coming through with that. There was, I had these weird handprints. I lived on a 12th story, like high-rise building in New York. And I had these handprints that looked like someone had like literally wiped down the side of my window. And I knew, I was like trying to tap into it. I was like, oh, there's something like sad. It wasn't scary, but it was kind of like, there's something sad that happened here. And I was like doing like readings for like with my cards around it. And I was like, I think someone, like there was like I didn't know if it was a suicide or a death. And then went to my building and I was like, hey, there's these handprints. They're like, oh, it's probably leaves. It's nothing. And I showed pictures and the woman was like, oh dear God. Like it was because it looked like,
their hands,
no way.
not leaves.
And there's no way to access it. And I said, were there window washers? Was there anyone that was, on the floor? And she was like, no, not, because it was the middle of winter. And she was like, not since the summer. So then I continued to like do some deep diving research, and there was a window washer who died there. Was cleaning the complex 2 or 3 years prior to when it happened. So it was before I ever moved into that building, and was getting the message of just like almost like he felt lonely, and it was kind of like going back into the routine of like where he like felt like himself. So I mean, I did all I could of just like a little a ritual and like ceremony of kind of sending him love and connection. And like, even though there's probably like a lot of entry points coming from my window, because I do work with energy a lot, that I'm like, I'm not the answer for this, and it's probably looking like a light to come here, but this is not like the end of your journey, basically. Right. And then after that, like the there were no more like prints or anything. So I've had spirits trying to connect, probably because as I came online, it was like, ooh, there's this conduit now. And like, oh, she's there.
She's there.
Yeah. And it was probably clogged up for a while, So it's like, oh, we can come talk to you. So I've had those type of experiences, but it taught me to boundary a lot of kind of like I was saying, almost like one of the big things I like joke about is office hours, where I'm like, I really need to sleep between like, at least 11 p.m. and like 7, 8 a.m. Like, please, unless it's a pressing message that I can immediately get to somebody, because it was coming through a lot like in the middle of the night. But that was mostly when I started to come back into this work. And I think it was kind of saying that like anything, there's going to be beauty and expansion. There's going to be challenge. So it was kind of like, are you ready to open to this? Because there's going to be a lot. And it was almost like my higher self, like saying like, okay, you're going to have to learn to navigate and prepare to be the most effective in this work. So there were like, I mean, I guess those were like the scary moments, but I kind of learned how to work with those energies, because a lot of people will do that. And there might even be people that are listening that they're like, yeah, I've had that. And then you shut down, where it's like, I don't want that. I don't want that. Like I've heard clients and friends be like, oh no, I don't want like ghosts visiting me in the middle of the night. So I'd rather not know. And I do think there's a way to have balance,
I've had friends that have told me, excuse me, of similar, oh, I heard this thing, and now I'm like,
yes.
Or they'll equate it with, I was visiting this hotel and supposedly it's haunted, and then, I heard this thing and now I can ever go back there again.
Yeah.
And they just completely like sever that gift or ability. I don't know what to call it.
Yeah.
So I think that's a very common response.
Yeah. And it's almost like a part, I feel like it's a part of like the journey, the hero's journey, and coming into our intuition is like, are you ready to receive this? Because there's a lot that comes with it. And like, it is a point of, okay, yes. And how am I going to, like, I'll talk to spirit all the time when there are like spirits that come through, and I'm like, if I'm here to help, but like also if not, like I have to put the boundary of like, you need to leave and there's nothing here for you. I've never had anything super scary, like malicious or negative, but it was more of kind of like a, like waking me up in the middle of the night, not knowing what to do with the information. But I think it does help you to boundary and learn how to work with it.
Right. Did you ever feel like you were losing your mind?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
oh my God, I'm crazy.
Yeah.
I need help.
Definitely.
You
Definitely.
did.
I felt like there were points when my best friend in Toronto, I would call her and her husband and I would give them like information and say, like, if anything happens to me, like if I'm institutionalized, like, you know, I feel crazy. But no, I've definitely now much like I know how to navigate it, but I think
you can differentiate between your own thoughts and outside.
And I think it's overwhelming when a lot comes at once. Like when you were saying you've had friends that have had experiences and they're like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go back there or I don't want to know. I remember being scared to share some of the information initially of people are going to think I'm crazy. And I even think in past lives, I was probably institutionalized and penalized for like practicing, you know, like using my intuition and practicing my gifts. So it was almost like, oh my gosh, I don't want that to happen again. I don't want to be punished. I don't want to be like imprisoned in any way. But that was probably in the initial stages of kind of unlocking it. So I feel like people do have that experience a lot, and it's like it is learning how to balance it. Yeah.
And how did you push through that like reaction of like, I'm losing my mind?
I think that one of the biggest things was everything we were talking about, like anxiety versus intuition of tapping into, does this feel like, I'm like, no, it feels true. Like it feels, you know, like I know this. And even though it's a lot, I'm like, I wasn't necessarily like, I'm not scared. It's more of a sense of like a lot of information at once versus fear. It was like a hard drive that was like an old iPhone trying to run the new programs. And I was like, oh, I just need to get used to running these programs and kind of assimilate to that. And I'm very blessed that I have friends that don't think I'm crazy that I could talk to. And I think that's and that's when I was saying even like the side of social media that's really like light and expansive right now is I think people have more access to community in this space as they're awakening to certain things of like, oh, I'm not crazy, whether it's someone else they follow, whether it's I've connected to so much of my soul family even through Instagram, like over the past couple of years of like other channelers that are now like besties. Because I'm like, oh, you get it, you know, and like we're getting the same downloads about like the world or about what's going on. So I think that, being able to sit with, is it, anxiety or intuition, and then being able to connect with other people, even if it's digitally as well.
Right. Yeah. Cause it's not like you can just say my neighbor does this too and I'll pop over and talk to them about it. I mean, not every, I can imagine very few people actually can do what you do. So, who do you turn to?
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
And it's amazing that now we live in an age where you guys can kind of like have a community and support each other.
Yeah.
I think it would be lonely.
That's the thing I always think about, like all of the people that came before us that didn't have the internet, that didn't have Instagram. And like I said, I know there's like, shadow elements of all of those things that we navigate today, but I'm like, oh my God, two of my best friends are in California and are like channelers. And I met them because I was like, oh, we're getting the same downloads about certain things. And like we were DM, and then we like, then we've eventually met in person and become friends. But back in the day, if like, being a witch in the like 1860s, like there's no one you could talk to, and
you're
receiving
the only
downloads
one
of information
in your village that like can hear things. How lonely that must have felt.
Oh, like I can't imagine. And I think that we even have kind of that like I was just talking to my best friend earlier today actually about ancestral trauma and like past lives and how it's still carried through you. And I think that even a lot of the things that when you were saying, have you ever experienced that going crazy, I think I probably was imprisoned. I think that I probably was persecuted as a witch. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, is it safe to share this information? Is that going to happen again? Right. And we have that like carried it throughout lifetimes. And I think it's really powerful the way that many of us are like kind of breaking through that in this lifetime, in this incarnation.
Right. So now that you mentioned past lives, I want to talk about that.
Yeah.
Because that's so interesting. So can you like introduce us to the concept?
Yeah. I think that my personal like kind of, I guess, belief system, philosophy, whatever you want to call it, is that we have had many lifetimes and that we always have the free will to incarnate into each one. So I think that even when we have like massive challenge in this life, we incarnated to learn those lessons, meet the people that we meet, move through this journey. And a lot of times, and I'm sure many people have this, and you've probably had this, certain things that feel, whether triggered in a negative way or in a positive way. I always say I definitely read tarot in a past life because it just came like that.
Right.
You know, it was very easeful. It didn't feel like I had a lot to learn. Like I said, I've studied from like the kind of nerdy aspect of like, oh, I want to learn more about like the numerology of it. But it came through at a very young age.
I was going to say, and you knew you had to do it.
Yeah.
Right? Because at 11 years old, I'm like playing with Barbies.
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about tarot.
And like back then, that was like I was saying, it was like the late 80s, early 90s where it wasn't cool. Like I remember even getting in trouble for like bringing them in my backpack to school. Because it wasn't like it is now, you know? So my mom was like, oh, like maybe don't take them to school because I had them in my backpack. I was like playing at recess. So I think that there's something like in a lot of aspects of choices we make, things we're drawn to or things we're triggered by even that are like, ooh, like that might have been a past life. And that's why that doesn't feel safe, because one of my biggest has always been around, like I said, like in being institutionalized. I'm fortunate to say I have not in this lifetime. I hope that remains. But I have always like, oh, I'm going to be. And I'm like, you know, I've felt unsafe to share information. Even to like my very best friend, there were things that were coming through to me in early 2020 that I was like, oh, like I don't want people, I'm scared to, I don't really care what people think, but scared of persecution or like, being like taken away. And that definitely comes from past life stuff. But similarly, like on the light side of that, I've connected with people that are like, oh, this is my soul family. I've known you from before, right? Where you're like, you've definitely been in a past life. And you like, this is where we meet again, where it doesn't feel like this is where we meet. It's like, oh, this is where we meet in this life. And that feels so incredible. Right. So I think that there's that we've definitely like had many incarnations, and it's when we're able to tap into the lessons from them, there's also a lot we can use to heal with that and connect to people and to ourselves in this lifetime.
Is there a way to like find out for sure? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like details?
I feel like there are definitely practitioners and healers that work specifically with past life regression. Some people will, I know there are practitioners that work with like going into hypnosis and going into past lives. Mm-hmm. For me, sometimes it comes through in readings where it's like, it's definitely not like my, I would say like not my major, not my, like I'm not known for past lives, but sometimes it will come through the way that sometimes spirit, like someone's grandmother, someone's, you know, like dad that passed away will come through in a reading. Sometimes past life stuff, I'll be like, oh, this is happening right now. Cause I'm like, I feel like you led a past life with this person that I'm seeing around you. And they're like, oh, that makes so much sense. Where there's like, it's activating fears, or it's activating the desire to, you know, flee something because there was relationship karma in that union in a past life. So I can see it, but in terms of if there's anyone that's really interested in diving into that, there are definitely practitioners and healers that's what they do. And that's kind of their gift in this lifetime, is to be able to see that, to help heal trauma in this one.
Right. Yeah. I was going to say, is it good to know? Because I know some people, they don't want to know their past or future. They just want like, leave me alone. I'm here now. That's all that matters.
I mean, it's like anything. It's like when we were saying, like if tarot resonates, like absolutely. Otherwise, like leave it and keep on your journey. If it resonates with you, if you feel like you, there's reasons that it could be cathartic, I think absolutely. I worked with, I don't think she does one-on-one readings anymore, but Elizabeth April used to do past life regression. She's amazing. And I think her online platform is all just Elizabeth April. And she's blown up, and she has like a show on Gaia now. So I don't think she does like one-on-one clients, but she had said to me that I had, and which I had intuitively, I felt, and she was like, you were definitely persecuted as like practicing your gifts and your magic, like as a witch. But she said there was also one lifetime where I worked a lot with herbology, which is funny because it's not something that I mostly am known for tarot, but like I create a lot of my own herbal tinctures and little elixirs, and I like make them for friends and family, but it's not something I sell, and not something she knew about me at all. You know, she's a stranger. And she was like, that was something that was really that you created a lot of healing with herbs, but that I was also persecuted with that. And so she was like, you know, that's something to be able to like explore and heal in this lifetime. So I think that, if you're drawn to want to know, and you're like, that might open some something up, or you feel limited because you're like, why do I feel these blocks? Why am I coming up against a lot of people that are scared to share their story as a writer, or kind of like, you know, come out to the world in certain ways. It may be cathartic to look into if you're going to see like, oh, that's why, because I've carried that trauma. And though it was true in that lifetime, it's not true in this lifetime. And coming out of it actually is going to offer like a ripple effect through past lifetimes to, you know, allow that openness and that healing to come through.
Right. I think it's so powerful to, you know, the idea of you've been here before.
Yeah.
And you got through it and you're here now.
Yeah.
And you'll probably be here again if you choose to.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because I have this like aversion to alcohol.
Yeah.
I don't know where it comes from. So we always joke around that like in a past life, I was this raging alcoholic.
Oh, probably. Oh, yeah.
I'm not interested at all.
That's
and like
so good.
I've tried, you know, social events.
Yeah.
People give you like a glass of wine. I'll drink some of it. I'll get this raging migraines. It's really bad. And then someone told me like, well, you drink cheap alcohol. So I'm like, okay, you're right. I'm cheap. So that's probably true. So we were in a village in Tuscany once where they have like their own winery and they make these wines from like rose petals and it's all so fancy. So I'm like, okay, this is it.
Yeah.
This is a test.
Yeah.
I drank a little bit, instant headache. Like, boom, my body's like, no, get it out.
Yeah.
No. So that's been like the running joke now. Like in my past life, I was this.
And it was probably something you healed in the life prior, because I always say like my dad and I, like he kind of gets what I do. He kind of doesn't. He's like 71, like Polish Catholic, like, you know, so it's like he sees that like I've helped people and even people he knows that like things have come through that are true. But he's kind of like, he's wary. And I always say to him in terms of past life stuff, I'm like, the more we heal in this one, the less lessons we have in the next one. Right. So he always is like, I'll take it in the next one. I don't want to deal with it now. But for me, like alcohol was a big thing in this one. And I was always like, oh, okay, if I can clear the addiction, I'll come back like you in the next life and be like, I have no interest. So that's probably something you already cleared.
Always like, listen, you all drink. I will sit here and watch. Like, it's fine.
Yeah.
I don't judge you, you know, enjoy your drink. Absolutely.
Yeah.
I know that I can't do it.
Yeah.
My body's like, no, don't even try.
Yeah. I no longer do, but that was a big lesson in this one. And I always say, I'm like, cool. Then my next lifetime, like you, I'm like, it won't even be a thing because I've healed it in this one. So for me, it is also like motivation of like the lessons we can learn, the karma we can clear, the things we can move through in this one. We're kind of like, okay, like then I'm setting my next iteration up to be a little easier or like a little less drama filled. Yeah.
That's so cool. My goodness, my voice, what the heck is happening? I sound like a 90-year-old smoker. And I don't smoke. I don't drink or smoke. I'm very boring.
Yeah, me too.
My gosh. So yeah, that's so interesting. Have you ever met Dr. Weiss?
No.
From, oh my gosh, Many Lives, Many Masters.
Oh, I know the book. I've read the book, but I've never,
So, obviously, like I read the book many years ago, and he was having a talk at a synagogue, you know, I don't know, like 10 years ago or something like that. And I went, and it was just to hear him talk. Yeah. But he was so peaceful. Yeah. Like he exuded such zen and peace and just being present. Yeah. It was insane. It was so magical.
And I think that's the beauty of like when we kind of access and surrender to that information is I truly have like zero fear of death because of the downloads, the information I've received around things like past lives, around like, you know, how energy transitions from one lifetime into another. And there's something that's so freeing about that of like, I'm definitely here to like, you know, learn as much as I can and heal as much as I can in this lifetime, but I don't have a sense of urgency or like fear around like death or negative things happening the way that I did prior to like accessing that, you know?
So what does happen when we...
obviously like this is only from my perspective. I believe because so I for this is like a dark, it gets better, but in 2017 I had like planned to kill myself. I had like a really, really dark night of the soul, but it's what led me into this work. So I'm so grateful for. That's why I'm like, even in the dark parts of the journey, I'm not afraid of anything anymore, because I've seen how kind of like they bring me where I'm supposed to go.
Right.
So after that is when I really came back into, the first thing I came back to was like drawing a tarot card a day. I was like, okay, like this is something that was very helpful as a kid, and I'm going to work with that. Tarot was the biggest modality that healed me through that. And then I also did a plant medicine ceremony in 2017 with ayahuasca. And that was the closest thing that I could say that I know around like literally almost choosing to take my own life and then willingly going into this plant medicine like healing that felt like having a life review, which is what I believe happens when we die. It's kind of like we go into this place of seeing, whether it's like a movie or a montage of like all of the moments of this lifetime, what we learned, what we experienced, the people whose lives we touched, choices we made. And I think that then there's the opportunity of if we want to tap back into the earth plane in another life or not. And that's why in every carnation, I kind of am like, oh, we had the choice to come here, you know? And even if we don't remember why or how, we chose to come in to learn these lessons, to meet these people, to reconnect with souls from our soul family from past lifetimes. And so, yeah, I think that in seeing and experiencing that, and it definitely, and I've done plant medicine ceremonies since then, but it definitely changed the way that I perceive this life. And I think I live more fully because I'm like, I don't have a lot of the fears around what that looks like. But I at the same time have a lot greater appreciation for this lifetime too. I'm like, I'm gonna, show up fully every day. I'm going to offer as much like love, openness, and healing to everyone I interact with as much as possible. But I also trust the journey of where it's taking me, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, I mean, it's good not to know to its
Yeah.
full extent.
Yeah.
But to know that, like you said, it's gonna be okay.
Yeah. And I think
Yeah.
it's also, I mean, it's still, there's still obviously trauma and loss when people transition to the other side. But even that is less scary or less dark to me after experiencing that. Because I'm like, oh, their soul is absolutely still there. They're still with us. And they're also making choices for post their transition, for their soul, for their highest good.
Right.
So that has really shifted, not even in my own mortality, but like around other people's transition points as well, of kind of like, okay. And I'm glad that I was able to access that like in my 30s, because it has made from this point on in my adult life a lot more freeing and a lot less constrictive and fearful too.
Right. Have you and this is kind of personal,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
like, have you lost anybody?
Yeah. Yeah. So my right before, and this was kind of leading up to my dark night of the soul, I had a really rough. So anyone who follows astrology, your Saturn return is when like where Saturn, which is like the mean teacher of the planetary system, it's kind of like the hard lessons, life lessons, where when it returns to where it was when you were born, which is usually around the age of like 27 to 30, 31, like that's how long the rotation takes. And so if you're at a good place in your life and it's kind of more of like, that's like a mini life review. Things will pop up.
Dang. Wait.
Is that what you're like? Wait, am I in it?
Shit. No, I'm not in it, but now it makes sense because you said 27 to 31.
Yeah.
Yeah, and at 30, I had like this huge like shakeup in my life. Sorry to interrupt you.
Yeah, no,
You're
absolutely.
Like, you're making me connect dots that I had not.
No, totally. This is why I love, and I work a lot with astrology and tarot and how astrology and tarot connect. So yeah, absolutely. A lot of people have these big shakeups. For me, that when you're saying, did I lose anyone? It was before my like full awakening. And so it was a lot harder. My best friend, who was kind of my mentor in the fashion industry, like my big brother, I worked for him since I was 18 and then we became like besties, passed away of HIV related complications at that point in my Saturn return. Thank you. He's with me all the time. And it's funny now, I feel like closer to him now than when we were alive because I've learned how to like tap into that. And then shortly after that, another good friend of mine in New York died by suicide. So it was like and I wasn't equipped the way that I am now to navigate those losses. It literally like, it was so dark. So my best friend passed, and then my ex asked for a divorce. I had lost my everything in like this Saturn return, like this couple of year period. So it was between 2014 and 2017 that all of this was hitting. And so at 2017, I had like lost like two of my best friends. I literally, my marriage, my big corporate design career, like, and I was living like just above poverty level in New York, which is really hard. So that's when I was like, I'm tapping out. Like, I don't want to be, and I didn't know a lot of the things that I know, and I hadn't come back into like my soul purpose and my soul work in this lifetime, but it brought me there. So I'm so grateful for that. But navigating that without the understanding of energy, how it is infinite, and how, like you were saying, it doesn't go away. It transitions and transforms, is so different than people passing away now. It's like, and I still, well, I mean, I can't imagine like, my parents, and maybe they live much longer. They're in their, their 70s, but like, I'm sure that's going to hit me so hard. But the way that I will look at that and move through it is so different than if it had happened before. Like when I lost my best friend, like I couldn't function, and I was just like drinking constantly, like waking up, sobbing, crying. And I think it would still 100% be hard today, but I would have I do have a better understanding of like, it's not gone, You're
like, better equipped to deal with the grief than you were before.
In so many ways. And just the understanding of like, oh, they're not gone. Like their physical body is, but like, and we'll miss that interaction. But so yeah, I think that that's a big change in kind of accessing intuition and understanding our energy, is processing grief and processing loss too. Like it doesn't make it a disco dance party, but it makes it more of like a seeing different layers of it than just what we see on like the 3D surface of the loss,
Yes. I lost my grandmother. It's going to be like 8 months ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, it's, I don't think I'm over it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
of course.
But, I, cause I also come from that school of thought, like I told you, energy's it's not gone.
Yeah.
Like I know she's there.
Yeah.
And I talk to her all the time, and I want to say she talks back. I don't know. But yeah, I remember like her being in the hospital and everybody saying like, oh, she's going to be okay. And I was like, no, this is it. Like I feel like the doomsday, just going, no, it's over. So then it was just waiting for it to be over.
Yeah.
And when it happened, obviously I'm sad, but it wasn't that overwhelming sadness.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There was a like, okay, well, this is how we're going to be from now on type of. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's like a transition, not an ending.
Right. Yeah. Like, okay, now I have to get used to having a relationship with you in a different way.
Right.
Yeah. And, like I said, I'm not fully there. Like I haven't been able to delete her phone number from my contacts.
Oh, yeah.
Even though it's the stupidest thing. Like,
it's one
I can't call her.
No, I have voicemails from 2013 from my best. Like, so it's still in my phone, of course. Yeah. I mean, that phone doesn't exist, but the voicemail saved because I feel and I think that's like, it's okay to like have that, like those things that like from a human level bring comfort 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
But yeah, I totally relate to what you're saying. Like the grief is there, but I feel like I cope with it a little better than maybe if it had happened when I was younger and I wasn't so I guess aware of my spirituality or how I relate to whatever that is.
Totally.
Yeah. It's a lot. Human existence, it's complex.
Yeah.
It's not for the faint of heart.
Yeah, totally.
What do you think about a person, like you mentioned, your dad's like a Polish Catholic?
Yeah.
Which is funny because we always have this joke, like, we're Cuban Catholics.
Yes. Oh, that's so funny. Yeah.
From like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with like this show from the 70s, Que Pasa USA?
Yeah.
So like there's an episode, like I forgot, it's something about saving the park. And they tell him like, Mr. Payne, are you Democrat, Republican? And he's like, I'm a Cuban Catholic. And it just reminds me of my dad so much. So it's like the like our line in, like an inside joke, like we're Cuban Catholics.
Yes.
So do you think that people like that, you know, like
Yeah.
Catholics can practice their own religion and then seek tarot and readings? And
I think that that's coming more online now. I think that it was kind of like I think people were always doing it under the surface. Like you probably
nobody
feel like,
says
yeah,
it, but
nobody's
all do
always
it.
doing it. Like there's if you've ever seen the movie Chocolat with Juliette Binoche, and she was like I think it's from the early 2000s, and she was this healer. Her thing was with cacao, like Mayan cacao, and
I'm gonna have to watch that.
Oh,
I
you will
haven't
love
seen
it. It's a beautiful movie, and it's from like the early 2000s. It's not like super old, but it's, you know, not new. And she would move around from village to village in France, and kind of like she would basically built the healing into this chocolates, like, and she had a chocolate shop. But even then, people were very like averse to kind of like, they would come like low key but not talk about it because it was a very religious like setting in this movie. So I think like that movie, like people that would go like in the back curtain to a tarot reader but not talk about it, like it was always happening for you know, since the beginning of time, which is why this is a divination tool that goes back so many centuries. Right. But I think now people are starting to reconcile that it doesn't have to be so black and white. And that doing like accessing healing through one doesn't take you away from the other either. It's like, it's not going to take you away from your connection to if you do find a connection to God through your religion, like that, this is not going to take you away from that. It's going to be an additional source of healing side by side. Whereas before, I think it was very like one or the other.
Right. You had to pick.
Yeah.
Like I know, like I still have people in my life that go like, oh no, don't do that.
Yeah.
Like that you're going to wake some demons. Like don't mess with that.
Totally.
Really, in this day and age?
Well, and I even think like on both sides, I think there are people in that like the like tarot or super like metaphysical or like Wiccan communities that are they've been burned by institutionalized religion. So they don't even like, they don't like the use of the word God or like Jesus. And I'm like, I'm down with all of it. Like I totally like, that. Oh yeah, like there's that side that like doesn't like that because they feel like we've been demonized by institutionalized religion, which I also understand. Right. But I'm kind of like, I find like Jesus as an ascended master very healing. I also like practices of Wicca, you know, and I don't think one is mutually exclusive. So I think that we're seeing more of like a unification of that and an acceptance of both existing at the same time and being healing at the same time, even within the same individual's life and practices. Right. And I'm grateful for that because I think it was kind of like pick a lane for a long time. Or if you were doing it, it was like subversive and taboo and like, we don't talk about it. Like I'm going to go to church and like no one knows I have a tarot reader, you know?
Yeah, exactly. I think that what helped me was, you know, like I told you, I was born in Cuba. So we're like, you know, we're Catholic. But then my neighbor was Baptist. So like she would invite me to church all the time. And I would go and like, you know, sing the hymns and do the whole thing. And then on Sunday, I would go to Catholic church. And then like the person down the street, you know, was like a medium. Yeah. So it was like all these like so cool. Mesh, like this mix of different approaches to God. And to me, it was normal. Yeah. Like, I thought it was so comforting. Yeah. You know, and then like my grandmother always had this saying, like, there are many avenues to the market. Yeah. We're all going to the same place. That. Yes. Just, you know, pick your street and go down your journey. Yeah, I love that. And that's the way I've always approached it. Like, I just think, you know, God is everywhere. Yeah. And it's up to you to figure out how you're going to get there. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I love that. But I can also see why some people are so scared. Yeah. What has been like your favorite reading without giving, you know, sharing too much personal info? Oh, that's hard because there's so many like that really touch me that like I cry. I think when I see something in someone that like, and I see them remember that piece, whether it's like a piece of hope, whether it's like occasionally I do have people's like spirits that are on the other side come through and like remembering that they're right there. One of the biggest is that this past year I had a girl who was, and it was like really intense for me because I was suicidal at one point, was like on the verge of that. And her mother had said, I want to
I want to book a reading for my daughter. I usually don't have people under 18. Like most of my clients, I would say, are like from like their 20s to their 60s is probably like the most common, right? Like that demo. This woman booked a reading for her daughter, and I didn't even know like really what she was just like, oh, she's in a challenging place. And it was coming through in the reading, like I could feel that that's where she was at. And
Oof.
I was like, oh, and it's like it was like, getting like the psychic hits of this, the intuitive hits, but also like and I'm sure that's why I was called in. Like we called each other into that moment in this lifetime because I'm like, I
Right.
know what this feels like. And so without kind of fully like using the word suicide or like going really dark into it, I was like, I know that you're in a place right now that seems really hopeless or that you may not have other choices. And I was like, I know what that's like. And I'm like, you're not bad. You're not wrong for having these thoughts or having these feelings, but I was like, there's something here with music that like you came into this lifetime to do. And she was like, she started like tearing up and she's like, I want to be a DJ. And she was saying how like that's what she asked for Christmas was like speakers or like something to do with like record players. And I was like, honestly, and she was still in high school. And as we know, like things in high school, it feels like that's your whole world and it's never going to get better. And like now looking at this of things we've probably all navigated at that age, it's like, oh, it does get so much better.
It's
And
nothing.
it's not to, and it's not even like to just diminish it, but it's like it's a short period, a blip
Right,
on
that's
your,
what I mean.
totally,
Yeah,
of like on your
it's
timeline. Yeah, 100%. But so I was kind of like, and I was talking to her about these gifts, and I'm like, it's not just something that I'm like, you have fun doing it and you feel like yourself doing it, but I'm like, you have a big mission. Like this is something you're going to heal other people, like with your music, with your relationship with music, and kind of dove more into that. And then her mom, like, and I still like I save a lot of like the emails and the DMs and stuff that people send me after. Her mom was like, she walked out of her bedroom. It's the first time I've seen hope. And she was like excited, and she was talking about like, what she's gonna do with like these with like her like record players that she got for Christmas and like all of this stuff. And it was just amazing. And I've stayed in touch with her mom, and she's like, she still has moments that are challenging, but we have her in therapy. And like this was such a turning point where she's like, somebody saw her, like somebody saw like the light, and like her gifts were, and which I think she was being bullied. I think there was stuff in school that it was like only the darkness, and that's all she could see was what was being reflected back from this like negativity and these really dark exchanges. So that will always be one of my favorites, because it was like, oh, but it was like when I was saying about tarot, it really is just a mirror of who she was. Like I didn't do that. It came through and was like, no, look at yourself. You're only looking at this tiny little piece right now, and like look at yourself, look what you have in you, look what you're here to offer the world. So those are the ones that like mean the most to me. And it's like I've also like, people ask me like, yeah, I have celebrity clients and all of that, and some of those readings are beautiful and very moving, but like that will always be like up until this point one that's like my favorite, because it was seeing somebody that like she could see it. It was like the moment that like she could really look in the mirror that was really like dirty and dusty, and like, oh, like that was, and that happens in different ways for people, whether it's around like, a relationship that has made them feel really disempowered and they're starting to buy into that version of them. And a reading kind of clarifies who they really are, or whether it's a job situation that they're looking to kind of move into their own business or a different industry that feels scary, but that they have the power to do it. Those are always my favorite, is kind of like when you can remind someone of who they are in this lifetime.
Right. Yeah. It sounds like you were able to remind her what her purpose was.
Yeah. Yeah.
And all of a sudden that made things so much more clear.
Yeah.
I often wonder if people would connect more to their spirituality, how many mental health issues would kind of go
Oh my
away or
gosh.
be
Yeah.
fixed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I that for me, that was the turning point, because I was on, and nothing against medication. I think we all need different things at different points in our journey. And sometimes
Absolutely.
like that's
Yeah.
absolutely the path. But I was on every single like SSRI antidepressant you can imagine, until like my kind of dark nights, then into my awakening in 2017. And now like I don't even drink coffee. Like I am like, I'm not on any medication. Because it was accessing and tapping into, my spiritual practices, my intuition. And I know like at the time I had the tools that I needed to navigate what I did, and I'm grateful for that at the time. But I 100% agree with you. I think once we can tap into that, there's so much healing that's available within us.
Yeah. Because I mean, obviously, like you said, we need medicine, we need medication. But I wonder, like, how many times are people being misdiagnosed?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like schizophrenic.
Oh, I would have, if
When
I had
they're-
shared with a doctor, they would have, I would have totally been diagnosed with like schizophrenia.
Right. Like I think about that all the time.
Yeah.
And maybe they're not, you know, it's not just conventional medication.
Yeah.
Maybe they're just really, you know, they need to like open up their spiritual
Yeah.
journey or
Yeah.
That's I don't know. That's just where my mind goes.
Yeah,
sometimes.
definitely.
So you mentioned astrology.
Mm-hmm.
How can you give us like a little introduction, little tidbit on how all of this works together?
Yeah, well, I think that so the reason that I love astrology is each of the tarot cards have an astrological ruling. So at any, you know, as you pull cards in a reading, there might be something that is important of like, oh, for example, if you have the star card come up, we're moving into Aquarius season at the end of January through end of February. It's like, oh, this might be coming in Aquarius. It can also point to like when we were talking about Saturn return of like, and you're like, oh, that did happen. You felt certain things that came through at that point in your life. So in readings, I can pinpoint either future points in time or things that may have occurred in the past based on the astrological rulings of the cards. So as a result of that, like I kind of do look at, I like to chart astrology because it's not like a diehard, like we have to live by that of like, like don't sign a contract during Mercury retrograde or bad things are going to happen. But it's kind of like, like when you were saying, oh, that helps me better understand my past self when I was going through my Saturn return. Even right now, we're in a Venus retrograde until January 29th of 2022. And Venus is in the same place that it was in the sky in 2013 to 2014. So the end of 2013 to early 2014. So a lot of things we navigated at that time, we may like have be coming back to them, but kind of almost in a like, oh, do I like how I went through that? What did I learn? I'm probably way more equipped to do it now, right? Of like big changes. And a lot of that.
Like round 2.
Yeah, round 2.
Figure out what you could do differently.
Yes, what you could have done. And kind of like for a lot of people, it is a really big fresh start from the, and when I look back, that was when I was like getting divorced. It was when I was leaving my big corporate job. Don't really love I'm not proud of how I navigated a lot of that, but I look at like even this year moving into 22 of really big changes. Like, you know, I moved to Miami. I'm moving into lots of new like chapters of my practice in terms of tarot healing, my podcast. I have a book that I'm finishing in 22.
How exciting.
So yeah, so I'm like, oh, it feels like really beautiful, like new beginnings.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that a lot of us had that in ways in 2013 to 14. Now we're being offered this new transit with where Venus is. And it's kind of like, what do we learn? What are we proud of that we did? How would we navigate certain things differently because we're being given the opportunity? So I like looking at astrology in those ways because we really can have those moments of like when you had that, like, oh, that makes sense with Saturn returns. Like, oh, okay, now I see where I was with Venus. It was an opportunity to start over. That marriage wasn't aligned. I really wasn't meant to be, you know, the creative director of Playboy for the rest of my life. And I was given a clean slate. Don't love all the choices I made back then, but it was like, now that I know kind of like what that can bring with Venus, I'm like, oh, I'm ready for it. I'm here for it. And there are things I would do differently. So that's what I love about being able to chart astrology, look at the patterns. And yeah, we can predict certain things, but it's also always in motion. So it's more of like a framework, you know?
Right. So have you ever met someone like in this lifetime that you were like, I knew you? Has that ever happened to you?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah. I've had it. Even when I was saying I met some of my soul family on Instagram, I was like, oh, it's crazy. My friend Phil, who Phil Good, he's like a very like famous like spiritual thought leader, and we connected, and it was like I followed his stuff because he was one of the first people like in my breakdown in 2017 that his content was really resonating. And then we were like DMing, and then we became friends, and then he came to stay with me in Miami, and he's even said, he was like, you were like the moment I like connected with you, he's like, we know each other. And it was like that. And people who follow both of us are like, you guys were either like husband and wife or like brother and sister before, because it's
so cool.
It was just like I know you, you know, definitely. Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. And I think it's like it comes through when you feel instantly at home with somebody. Because some people you're excited to meet, but you're like, we're still getting to know each other. And it's like, okay, we're learning.
You know, it's new.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's that feeling of like instantly like, oh my God, I can 1,000% be myself because like I know you. And like I like, you know, I feel like we already are in sort of this like soul family that we're cool. There's nothing that we have to kind of prove or show to one another.
Right. There's this like deeper understanding.
Yeah.
That like I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
It's like this familiar, intense familiar feeling.
Yes.
That, you know, and it goes beyond comfort. Because you can meet someone and be immediately comfortable with them. It's I need to find a better way of putting.
No, definitely. It's it's like
that
a knowing.
Into words.
No, I know exactly what you mean, but it's like that inner knowing because you're like, oh yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's so interesting how that happens. Have you ever fought it? Like you're like, no.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think that it can be, here's the funny thing is like in relationships, it doesn't always mean that it's your forever person. It could be that you knew them in a past life and you guys have karma to work out. So one of my exes, 100% I had that. And I think people mistake it as like, oh, this means this is my person. This is going to be my spouse or whatever in this lifetime. And it's like, oh, we were meant to come together because we had some things to like move through and clear. But I had then seen in a plant medicine journey that I had robbed this person in a past life, like Monopoly Man style with like a bag from their house, and that they had to come in and like they were not kind to me in this lifetime. But I was like, okay, I think the karma has been cleared, where it was kind of like
been exonerated.
Yes, I'm like, I'm sorry I robbed your house before. Thanks for like emotionally beating the shit out of me. We're good. Like, you know, like,
I've paid my dues. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. But I think that's another thing, especially in romantic relationships where it can get tricky because people are like, oh, it feels so familiar, which is amazing. And sometimes that does mean that it's like your person in this lifetime. But sometimes it's just like, oh, we're supposed to come back together because we have some things to move through karmically, you know?
That's, I never thought of that, to be honest. But of course, it's like 100% true because why would someone be your person forever?
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah. Huh. Okay, food for thought. That's interesting. So we quickly talked about how you you started this journey when you were young and then you kind of like strayed away and I feel like it found its way back to you. Like it pulled you back in.
Yeah.
Like, hey,
oh, definitely.
You forgot.
Yes.
Come back.
Yeah.
Right? What would your advice be to someone that's kind of like, going through something similar?
Yeah, I think that it is. I'm probably going to butcher this quote, but like Oprah has this quote of first things come to you in a whisper and then an audible tone. And then if you don't listen, like a shout, And I think a lot of people are hearing the whispers, if not the audible tone right now of like either being called to make a career shift of like, this isn't my sole purpose. And I kind of know it. So I would say, listen to I had the freaking shout come in very loudly, aggressively. So I would say listen to the whispers, listen to the audible tones with that. And you don't have to know like exactly how, but just even a curiosity as that comes in of like, I'm curious to listening to that. I'm curious to where that takes me, because I think that a lot of us may have chose, whether it was romantic partners, career paths, all of the above, to fit into what we thought success looked like. And that was very much like my story. And like, oh, I want to be this like Carrie Bradshaw, like, fashion designer of New York and like super successful. And in ways I was on the surface, but it was definitely like, now that I do this work, I'm like, this is what I came here to do. So it was almost like, God, source, the universe, we always have free will. It was like, okay, we're going to let you move through this and like learn the lessons you need to. And if you need to go through this part of the journey to understand more deeply your abilities and like what you're here to do, cool. But I think a lot of people are having the call right now of like, whether that's how they're going to navigate life differently, whether they're exiting relationships or jobs to something more aligned or opening to new purposes and new places that they're being called. So I would say like the biggest thing is just listen and be curious and try not to shut it down,
Yes, that's a big one. Yeah, because it's, if we've talked about, it's scary for people.
Oh my gosh. If someone had told me when I was at like the height of my career as like a global VP and creative director of Playboy that I was going to be like a full-time tarot witch, I'd be like, you can shut the F up. Like, that's never going to happen. And that I was going to leave New York, I'd be like, now. And like, I am so grateful I'm here in Miami doing this work. Like I can't, like, every day I just wake up like overwhelmed with gratitude. But if someone had told myself that in 2012, 2013, I would be like, yeah, like,
No, you don't know what you're talking about.
Like, hell no. Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Have you ever had to deliver bad news?
Yes. And I think that that's one of the misconceptions of this work is that it is so healing and so like very largely positive. And I would say like almost all of my readings, I rarely see super negative things come through, but I always tell people, I'll tell you what I see. And like when I ask for what is helpful, healing, and empowering that the person in front of me needs to hear, that's ready to hear. So sometimes they're in a relationship and you can energetically sense that they know it too, like they're on the fence. And the way that I will deliver that, I'm not like, you need to leave this horrible human. I'll just be like, you can choose to stay in this as long as you feel you need the lesson. And I'll guide people to like ask yourself every day how you're feeling in this, and
Right.
even ask like God, source, the universe, allow me to like have the clarity to stay in this if I need to learn lessons and to be open to the guidance when I'm being called to leave. So things like that I do see. I know that there are certain readers that are much more like smack down, like you need to get out of this now. I try to be really gentle with the process because sometimes, and it's like, I don't have children, you do, but I'm sure you see with your children, I see this with my niece and nephew, like you have to like they have to go through things to learn themselves. So I might be able to see like, this is not your person, like get out of this, you'll save yourself some heartache,
Right.
but they may need to go through that heartache to be 100% clear on their choice and feel empowered when they choose it. And I think it's like, that can be, it's one of the blessings and curses of intuition. Like I have this even with family members and close friends where I don't over like insert myself when I see someone doing something that I'm like, no, this isn't the job for you, or that's not the boyfriend for you. But like, if they come to me, obviously, or especially if they're like, can I have a reading on this issue?
Right.
I will be clear with what I see, but it's kind of, a lot of people we have free will. It's like one of the things in this lifetime that we're granted. So being able to move through what we need to until we can receive that clarity. So that's probably, I mean, it's easier in some ways with clients because it's more objective. I think it's harder seeing it with people that like are in my life that I love and care about, right? Where I'm like, oh, you're doing that thing again. Okay, that's how she's got to learn it, like
That must be so frustrating.
it can be,
Because you're like, no.
Yes.
Don't waste time on that.
Yeah.
Or look over here. Look at this other thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, 100%. And it's like, I've definitely had that in friendships where I'm like, I'm like, you got to learn in your own time. It's like, the kid who like falls down, like doing the same thing 8 times. And on the 9th time is like, oh, I'm not going to do it. And I am going to tie my shoes. I'm not going to run with my shoes untied. You're like, okay, now we've got it, but that can be, I think it's harder with, people in my personal realm, but no, in readings, when I have to deliver that, I try to just do it with so much like kindness and mindfulness of how I would want to receive that, how I would deliver it to someone that I love.
Right.
Because it's like, be kind to ourselves. I've done things many times and probably will still continue that I have to learn multiple times, and it's not so cut and dry. So I deliver news when it's not like, great news, but I try to do it with like, be gentle to yourself as you navigate this part of the journey that's not going to be so fun,
That's so interesting. Yeah, because in like movies and the stereotypical like tarot reader, like I know we talked about Miss Cleo and at our phone call, like everything's so black and white and like, well, now you have to do this, and so it's so interesting that.
And the thing I always explain too is it's definitely not so black and white. It's people come to me, I'm pretty known for timelines of like, probably because my like connection to astrology of like, oh, like I've had someone come to me and I'm like, oh, you're gonna meet somebody in the next 5 weeks, and she was like, no way. And I was like, it's someone through work. She's like, everyone I work with is fugly. And I'm like, okay, well, think bigger. I'm like, this is I'm like, I could be a vendor, like a client through work. It's not like your coworker Bob, right? And so then she contacted me, was like literally 5 weeks from the day of our reading, someone from the London office came in. We started dating. They're now engaged. So cool. So I'm known for timelines, but even within that, I will say that like in terms of like the Akashic records, how timelines work, it's almost like a Tetris game where things are always shifting. So I see the most probable timelines, but every decision we make can shift those. So it's kind of like, okay, this is the most predominant that I see today, but like, like making 5 different choices from today through February may then shift that timeline. So,
Right.
and it's also like there's nothing set in stone. So the free will that we activate within that doesn't mean like, oh, this is absolutely 100%. Like we have free will to change that. Even if you see something you don't like in a reading, like if it's like hey, there's going to be this conflict like that, you know, I see coming up in the next 2 weeks, just be mindful of that. If you receive that and you're like, I'm going to come to the table with at work, a work conflict, like my higher self and more conscious and not as combative, it's probably going to mitigate the situation, you know? So there are things that we always have free will. So I kind of offer what I see. I'm always like, it's like taking the temperature of your energy at this point in time and whatever clarity and tools that provides, but it's definitely not set in stone.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, yeah.
That's very comforting. How would you explain time? Is it not linear?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely believe that it's not linear. I believe that, you know, we use linear time kind of in this like 3D human matrix to give an understanding of how we're moving through it. But I think it's all happening almost like stacked, like instead of like from moving from like left to right in terms of past to future, it's kind of stacked on top of each other. And so I think that we can access like our past self and our future self all the time. Like I have moments that I'm so grateful for my life in Miami that I'll send, I always say like postcards to my past self of like, girl, gets better. Like you get the Versace bag, you have the beautiful apartment, you're in this amazing city with such cool community. Like, you know, to my past self that's like crying on the floor of this horrible, like, you know, shitty studio in New York. So I think we can access that. And those are almost breadcrumbs that we can leave to our past self to guide them, that feel that sense of hope, that feel that connection to these different, you know, layers of time. And at the same point, I'll ask my future self for guidance out of, you know, when I'm not clear.
That's
I'm like, she knows where I'm headed. She knows it's even better at like age, like, well, you know, 40 something, 50 something than it is today. So when I'm like, oh, like when I have impatience about, am I going to have a divine partner, like a co-creator in this lifetime as a romantic partner? I'm like, I know that I do at some point, and it's whenever that's meant to be. And I'll like talk to her about that of like, be patient, just don't force yourself to go out with that mofo just because you're lonely, you know, like that's what she's telling me. So I think that like we can access all of those timelines because they're stacked. They're not unreachable, you know?
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're taught to look at time linear.
Yeah.
But that does not make sense.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, just from a human perspective, like we within ourselves, we can choose to live in the past or the future.
Yeah.
Right? As a person, like if I'm always thinking about, you know, what I did a year ago or who I was or whatever, that's living in the past.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mentally, we can do that.
Mm-hmm.
So to me, the whole idea of time being linear hasn't really like made sense.
Oh, absolutely. And I think even when we go back into memories, we're activating the past timeline, and there's ways to like work with that and even heal parts of, I mean, you maybe not necessarily in the way that you're like, I can change a complete situation, but you can heal kind of like your energies around something and like give that, like when I'm always saying I send tools to my past self of kind of like, and I fully believe when there was that crossroads of I could have exited this lifetime and a sequence of events happened that I didn't, I'm like, because I'm constantly like sending her like a little survival kit, you know, of like, it gets better, like you're going to get through this part and it's so worth it. So I think that we can also work with those timelines too.
Wow. Okay. That's getting mathematical. My goodness. I thought you were going to give me like a simple explanation. No. This is great. Wow. Now I'm stumped. My God. Okay. I thought you were going to tell me like, oh, it's circular.
I mean, I believe it all exists at once, and it's so funny because I'll have these conversations with my best friend and she'll be like, my brain hurts, stop talking. But I think it's empowering to know too, of like, because that opens up so much. And like, although every decision that we make carries weight and is important, it also is more flexible and more fluid. It's not so rigid. Yeah.
Right. Do you think we choose when we're going to leave?
Like I think that our human selves don't always know that, but I do believe it. Yeah, I believe that like our higher self, the way that we made our contracts to come into this lifetime, yes. And I think like sometimes when it's very tragic and very definitely like not fair, not just in how it went out, it can be a shock to like the humans, like ourselves, if that's our exit point, and those around us. But I do believe like in the transition to the other side, it's kind of like okay, like that was in my contracts for whatever reason that were chosen. So I do believe that.
Right.
Yeah. And there's something about that I do find freeing as well. Like when I was saying, I have less fear or like, yeah, just like limitations around how I live my life, knowing that. Cause I'm kind of like, I trust the contracts I signed coming in, like even all of the darkest points of my life up until now, I've seen why. Even at this point, I'm like, I've seen a lot of the whys of why I navigated that. And it was terrible at the time. It was, I went through some terrible things in New York, and I still am like, oh, I understand. And I think I'll continue to probably understand as I move through this lifetime.
Right.
Yeah.
You figure out the why.
Yeah.
And that's it's very gratifying.
Yeah.
Right? When all of a sudden something makes sense.
Yeah.
Where it didn't make sense before.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to talk about you quickly alluded to the fact that you were in the fashion industry and all of that stuff. So is that what led to you making your own tarot card deck?
Yeah. It's I definitely, so my I went to, college for fashion design. I worked for I designed for Nike, Donna Karan, Playboy. I had my own lingerie line at a point. And I always really did love I like the element of the visual aspects of fashion and things that make people feel beautiful. And it's funny when I took that, I think a lot of people have this, and those of us that have gone through a switch from something more in the material world to like spiritual or wellness work, we're like, oh, is that bad? And I had this like, am I supposed to be wearing like a skirt made of wheat and like living in a hut in Costa Rica with my dog? Like, is that what I'm supposed to be doing now? And I'm like, no, this is still part of me, and part of the like gifts that I was given in this lifetime were I'm a visual artist. So I illustrated my own tarot deck, and I still really love like dressing up my avatar. I always say like, if this is, I mean, this might be my last human life, I'm going to have fun. I love food. I love, accessories. I'm going to have fun with it. And I definitely bring that to like my brand to make it more approachable. So when I created my own tarot deck in 2018, it's the way that I used to teach classes, is I would say, for example, the world ruled by Saturn, that like when I was saying Saturn, it's kind of like that teacher of like life lessons of all the things that they've moved through. It's Betty White in my deck. Cause I'm like, she had, and it's crazy. She just passed. We love her, but she had a very long and like really impactful life. And that's Saturn vibes of moving through all of those lessons. So I'd be like, oh, the world is like Betty White. The Hierophant is Oprah, because it's kind of like those aha moments, those super soul moments. And I'm like, so that's Oprah vibes. And my best friend in 2018, we were on a trip to Amsterdam together, and I was looking for a new tarot deck, because I always, even though I've read with the same one largely, I always collect them. Like, I want one that's all kind of like really cool, empowered women. And that was an aha moment of like, my best friend looked at me and she's like, you should just illustrate it. Cause I was, had illustrating, in my background in fashion. And I was like, oh, like that sounds like a good idea. I don't know. And I sat on it for a couple of months, and then I created my deck in 2018. And so I originally was just like, oh, I'll use it. If nothing else, if no one uses it, I'll print one copy and I'll read with it and I'll teach with it. And then it ended up like getting published and coming out, and now it's sold all over. And it's cool because I'm so grateful that other people resonate with it and they're learning tarot as a result of it. But yeah.
I think it's so cool that you chose modern day women. Because it, like someone new coming to tarot may not connect with the older cards and what they mean, but everybody knows who Betty White is.
Totally.
Right? Like everyone knows who Oprah is, and they can quickly make connections.
And that's what it was. Because I feel like the old deck, it's like popes and like queens and kings and kind of like, what is a page? Like, so a lot of people were kind of like, I don't really, it doesn't have a meaning to their personal experience. Unless you're like
a history buff. Yeah. A lot of it will go over your head.
Yeah.
Because, okay, the Pope and.
Yeah. And it was also like all like old white guys mostly are the cards. And I was like, I wanted to come from like from a female perspective too and celebrate that. So yeah, all of mine are like iconic, women from like our modern age to help people learn and be like, oh yeah, that is like Oprah. I get that. Or like, Justice is Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's like, okay, cool. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think that like one of and people are always like, what are the knights? And I'm like, the knights are kind of fast moving messengers that kind of bring things to the collective through message. And I made Mindy Kaling the Knight of Pentacles because I love her. And I'm like, she's been such a badass in terms of like, this is what you can do as an entrepreneurial woman. And that's kind of like the entrepreneurial knight is the Knight of Pentacles. So yeah, I tried to create a deck that was approachable and could democratize tarot for people that were intimidated of like, oh, it's a lot of cards. I don't even know what any of these images mean. So I'm glad that like it has been received and it's helping people to learn in a new way.
I think it's genius.
Thank
and
you.
the course that you have coming up, are you going to be using your deck?
Yeah, I'm going to be using both the Smith Rider-Waite and my deck side by side because a lot of even my deck is derived. So the Smith Rider-Waite was the one that I was talking about that was like came out in the late 1800s.
The one you bought at Barnes & Noble.
Yes, and it's kind of like that's most people know it. It's kind of like the most iconic imagery. So I'm going to be teaching with mine and that one side by side so that other people that use other decks that are not mine still kind of see the old school iconic imagery, and all of that imagery is built within mine too, to some degree. And it's a course about like tapping into intuition through tarot. So kind of it's going to be how to read, but also how we really get more into our intuitive gifts through the cards as well.
Right. And people can sign up in your website.
Yeah. It's going to be, I think February, March, it's the spring for sure.
Yeah.
I'm aiming for like before the equinox in the spring. I'm working on it now. So yes.
I like that. That's so cool. Like, right. Okay.
Yes. Yeah.
That's going to be super exciting. I'm sure that it's going to be a hit because you're just a wealth of information. And I love how you make everything so accessible.
Thank you. Yeah. That was totally my goal because I do feel like it's intimidating and it can make you feel like, oh, it's too hard or like, I'm not going to be able to do that. And like I said, everyone can do it. Absolutely everyone. So if there's any mild level of interest or curiosity, like it is accessible for sure.
Right. So I have one more question from actually one of our listeners when I mentioned that you were coming on.
Yeah.
They said in this specific scenario, like start diving into tarot and how do you make sure that no darkness comes in?
Yeah, that is a really good question. And I think that when I was saying how I do kind of like my meditation and my prayer before each reading, it's really good to kind of put the intention of information, clarity, messages, signs, symbols only coming from the light. And however you want to state that. I also like cleanse my space with herbs, cleanse the deck. Like at the beginning of like my work day, beginning of every day, I cleanse my space very intentionally to remove old energies from like old readings, from things that may have come through. But I think kind of like setting, and if you read for me, I have like a little space in my apartment that I use as a tarot like salon or tarot studio. And I'm very mindful about like keeping that space very like clean and clear of energies. But I think, a small like meditation or prayer beforehand of kind of just like the only letting information, like I said, mine is that is helpful, healing and empowering and of the light to come through. That's going to be received by the client, by the person that I'm working with.
Yeah. I thought that was a good point because you often hear of people starting to dabble into this and then all of a sudden they experience this crazy things that don't feel so good.
Yeah.
So
that's why I think when I started to experience a lot of crazy like spirit energies, like from the other side, that was what quickly taught me about boundaries too. So it's like coming into it very boundaried of like, I'm here to receive all of the messages that are healing and empowering, but like, that's all that I'm going to allow through my channel, through my cards,
Right. I keep thinking about the guy with the palm prints.
Yeah.
How come he hadn't, like, as they say, moved on?
Yeah.
Is that a thing?
So I talked to another psychic friend of mine because I had kind of done like a little ritual. I was like, talking to him, like sending him so much love, but like loving boundaries. It's kind of like what we learn with humans.
Yes.
Spirits have it too, right? Where I was like, I love you. I see you. I know why you're coming here, but like, I am not the answer. And like, I think he was in this loop of what he did for a living with the window washing. And also like, because I did a lot of psychic activity, my apartment was probably like lit up to him of like, oh, there's someone who I can.
A beacon.
yes,
right?
totally,
Like,
that I can go to. And I was like, but
yeah.
I'm not the light. I'm like a channel, So I was talking to a friend who's a psychic, and she said that her experience, she works more as a psychic medium, where I'm more like a psychic energy reader. She said that that it's rare, but that she has seen spirits that get stuck in that loop. And she was like, where we can like send him energy to go, like to move on and transition. And then when you were talking about, is everything contracted? And I was like, I do believe it is, but some things are super tragic, and it's so jarring that that's more when people, I think, get in those loops, when they're kind of like, where the heck did it? Like he literally passed away from falling from a tower window washing. So I'm sure that's very jarring to like not just the body, but to the soul of like, oh my gosh, like, and then trying to make sense of that transition. So she, I did like a ceremony and a ritual around it. She came over and was like helping me work through it, because I was like, I need someone else's perspective on this. It was when I was very new, when I was coming into this work. So yeah, I think that can happen. I think it's more rare, but I think that was probably the case with that, and can be the case. Yeah.
What do you think about all these like famous mediums that have come out in the last couple of years, and all of a sudden, you hear like how they're that it's not true, or they'll do like very generic readings and the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's sad, and I think that can happen in any industry.
Mhm.
Obviously, this is mine, so I'm like attached more to that than others. I think that there are so many people that are really gifted with this, and like I said, everyone can tap into it. Some people have been working with it longer, have more access to those gifts. But I always am saddened when those things happen, that they're manipulating people, or
Right.
they're using kind of like this as a false way to
Mhm.
seek fame or financial abundance. But I think that can happen. It can happen with lawyers. It can happen with doctors. It can happen
Yes.
with So I look at that as, it's definitely like, it's heartbreaking, but I think that it occurs in every industry. And the more of us, it's the same as like if there's a terrible medical practitioner or a terrible
Mhm.
lawyer that's exposed. The more of us that are doing this from a sense of soul purpose and for good, we have to like come out even stronger, and still be able to offer this healing to the world, and not be kind of, I don't know, like negatively impacted ourselves by that, of like, oh, what are people going to think? Like, I know that I'm coming at this from a place of healing, and it's
Yeah.
unfortunate that other people are damaging this industry as a result of doing that, but it's not gonna, hopefully, I mean, it's not gonna stop me, and hopefully it's not gonna stop others from coming into this work as a result of that.
Yeah. Yeah, you put it perfectly. I always think about it from that perspective as well. Like, I come from a teaching background,
Yeah.
and that profession speaks to a lot of people that want to help and want to be of service, but it also speaks to a lot of people that just want to be in a position of authority.
Yeah.
So you'll have some really great teachers, and then you'll have teachers that just want people to look up to them and just
Yeah.
like bow down to, like, oh,
Yeah.
you're the teacher, you're so perfect, you know everything type of
Yeah, that needed that
energy.
validation probably
Yeah.
growing up, and now they're seeking it in that. Yeah.
Right. So I think I completely agree with you. Each profession has that appeal.
Yeah.
And it's just unfortunate that in this one, you hear more about the ones that are not doing it for the
Yeah.
right reasons versus people
Right.
like you who are actually helping and, have a gift.
Yeah.
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 It's a shame, but I think that as people become more aware, it should change, hopefully.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah.
I think that like when we were talking about, people were always kind of seeking this like divination and guidance underground. People are now, it's more open, and
Mhm.
because of that, there probably is going to be more there's more celebration of the people that are doing good work, work from of the light, and that's probably going to counterbalance a little bit of what we're seeing in some of the
Right.
negative in this.
Right. Do you read every single day, or you give yourself some rest?
I usually will take days off on the weekend. It depends. I change my schedule up, and then if I have like personal things, family visiting, obviously, like I take time. It's really hard for me to read with other people in my space, because then I'm reading their energies. Like my
I
dad gets
see.
creeped out by it, because like I read I'm very close to my dad, and I can like read his mind a lot. So
Wow.
it's so it's distracting though,
Yeah.
when I'm trying to read energy for other people. But probably, I would say like 4 to 5 days a week I'm in readings, and it shifts because I don't really have like a hard and set schedule on my website. If you book with me, there's a calendar, so you can always see like what the availability is. But I think after leaving such a corporate life, I didn't want to be like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. So it's kind of like what feels aligned. It shifts based on the season. It shifts. Like I'm doing some like events now in Miami. I'm doing it's like a private event at Faina and then a Soho House event at the end of the month. So then I'll take time when I'm doing like, live stuff. But it varies. Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because sometimes I wonder, like, how much does it take from you? Spirit, like energetically and spiritually? Like, can you only do a set number a day until you're depleted?
I try to keep it to like 4 to 5 a day max because I do notice.
That feels like a lot though.
Yeah, I mean, I take breaks in between, but yeah, 4 to 5 a day is like the max. And then some days I'll just be like, I need to go to the beach today. And I find a lot of healing, which is like, I love being here, being at the beach, being physically in the ocean. And I'm like, I need that, like, to restore and recalibrate my energy fields. And I think it's, like I said, it varies. Sometimes it's very energizing and I'm like, oh yeah, I feel great. And other times I just know that like both my physical and like my spiritual body are asking to reset and rest.
Right. And one last question, because I could have you here forever.
I love you. This is amazing.
Oh,
yeah.
Thank you. Who are spiritual guides? Like, where do they come from?
Oh, in terms of like when we feel like our guides around us, you mean?
Right.
Yeah. I think
who are, you know what I mean? Because sometimes I feel like, well, maybe there's somebody that I was related to.
Yeah. I think that they can be. I think that they it's like the way that I look at it is like our team of spirit guides is like anyone from people that could have been like related to us, like ancestral, like past, can also be like archangels are up in the mix. It can be other like beings from other star systems as well. I think it's not limited necessarily to only people that are like passed to the other side that we knew, but I think it's a collaboration of energies that are connected to us, and parts of us are in them too. So it's kind of like our team that is connecting to our higher self to help guide us. And that's what a lot of people who do this work will say, my guides. I look at like our guides as similar to our higher self because they're all part of our higher self too. So, I mean, it's one of those things where that's like another linguistic, you could say like one or the other. Because I often will be like my guides, or, people will say like my higher self. And in readings, I often will say they, because I don't want to confuse people. I'm just like, they're saying,
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a combination. Some people will very strongly be able to identify like, oh, I often feel like Archangel Raphael coming through as one of my guides. Some people will say like, I'm very connected to like the Syrian star system and I feel them coming through. And some people do feel their ancestors. I definitely, and I'm sure you probably have this, especially like with your grandmother. She's probably such a big part of your team and will continue to be. I have that with certain ancestors of mine that I just like know it and I feel them around me in collaboration with other guides as well.
So you said something that like immediately caught my attention.
Yeah.
You said beings from other star systems?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
So like different, like, so like this is a whole other conversation.
Sorry. I'm sorry.
No.
Okay. I have so many questions.
So like in our galaxy, that's like our star system. There's also different star systems of like, for example, I feel a lot of connection to Syrians, like the like Sirius star system. Some people feel connection to the Pleiades, the like Arcturians, and feel that energy come through. I didn't know what it was with the Syrians for me until there's a point, because I'm an astrology nerd, that I would feel very activated every year in Leo season. And my ex is a Leo. I'm like, it's because I was married to a Leo. Like, why is this coming through? And when I would pinpoint the times that it was coming through, it was when the Earth was aligned with Sirius B, the star system, Sirius B. And I was like, oh, I would get really powerful downloads, information coming through. And then I started to look into, oh, what is that? And then I was seeing other people that were activated by or feeling like Syrian, people from the or beings from the Syrian star system coming through. And similarly, people have that with like Arcturians, Pleiadians. There's multiple different. So if anyone feels like a strong resonance to a certain time astrologically, that you can track that too, or just like something about one of those star systems, like you're drawn to it for some reason, you're drawn to certain constellations or certain, there's usually a connection there, which that's why I'm like, for some of us, it's archangels. For some of us, it's other like entities from star systems. For some, it is ancestors. I feel like it's often a collaboration and like combination of all of the above that are with us. Yeah.
I'm going to sound so ignorant right now, but I have to ask.
Yeah.
So Are these aliens?
I mean, you could say aliens, yes. And
we could say that.
You could say it's safe to say aliens.
Okay.
I'm always like weird about saying aliens because I think that it's like, for me, that word, it's funny, it was very alienating. So when people would talk about it in the past, I was like, I don't know about this. And then when I started to experience things, I was kind of like, oh, like higher dimensional beings, like whatever you want to call it. People say extraterrestrials, higher dimensional beings, but like, yeah, I guess you could say aliens for sure. Like, do I believe that now? 100%. But like years ago, I would have been like, oh, that's another thing I would have been like, hell no. Like, are you freaking kidding me?
You would have laughed it off.
Yeah, totally. But now everything that like I've connected to energetically, I'm like, oh, there's no way that I think that it's only not only like just our Earth plane, but like only our galaxy, only the Milky Way that exists.
Right.
Like there's infinite galaxies, there's infinite star systems. So it makes sense that some of us are more connected to some than others, you know?
Right. Yeah. I mean, mathematically, there's like what? Thousands?
Yeah.
One has to be, okay.
Yes,
at least one.
Totally.
Oh, what do they call that when you're like, when you're sleeping and you like
astral projection?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Have you experienced that?
I have, and I think that a lot of us do, and we don't always remember. That's what I would say.
It's probably a good thing for me.
Yeah,
I would totally freak out.
I feel like we do, and that's when I'm like, oh, I shut it down for years. Even when I think about like when I was such a heavy drinker, I'm like, I wanted to shut down a lot of those things because I was like, I don't want to deal with that, and that was my way of like doing that.
You're self-medicating.
Yeah, totally. Of like, I don't want to access that right now. It's too much. It's too much. But I think a lot comes through in the astral realms, and for some of us, it feels like very vivid dreaming. Astral projection is it does feel more intentional, almost like doing it from a meditative state, or even in your dream state where you can kind of I don't want to say control it, but you know it's happening and you're making conscious choices of where it's being guided. And I've even connected with others, like other people. When you were saying, have I met like people that are soul family from a past life, like my friend Phil Good, my friend Lori Ladd, like I've had that with them.
Wow.
Yeah. So,
oh my gosh.
Yeah. So I think that happens for sure. And I think, like I said, many of us can and even have done it, but maybe you're like, oh, and you've probably even had dreams where you're like, there's something to that, but like, no, maybe that's crazy. Or you start to wake up and it fades, like the memories of it like fade. But the more that we do it and the more that we see that we're able to not like navigate it from a place of choice and consciousness. Like one of the things is to look at your hands and like when you see like, oh no, I'm here, I'm choosing this. Like I can see, and some people will have like something like I have tattoos, things on their hands that you're like, oh, I'm checking in. No, okay, I'm in this. It's not just being controlled by another like part of me. Like I'm choosing this. I'm navigating this as me. In the astral. That definitely.
Wow. No, you're good. That's so interesting. I tried looking into that once and I fell down this rabbit hole on Reddit, and it was so scary because it was all these threats about how, these terrible experiences. Like you come across this like being and it's a monster, and like, then you're trapped or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what is this? Okay, I'm out, tapping out.
Yeah, no, totally. And I think it's kind of like that's something that came through later for me. It just would like happen. And then I was like, oh, wait, how do like again put protection around. One of the other things is like putting like a grounding cord of imagining like a cord of light to like your physical body on the earth plane, so that you're like, I'm always coming back into that when you like explore in the astral. So yeah, it's not something that's been like an all the time thing for me. It almost came through accidentally, and then I realized that I was aware of it, and I was like, oh, it's almost like sneaking into a party and you're like, oh wait, I'm here, and I'm like, now I'm gonna explore this mansion that in this party that I got into of like, holy shit. So I was like,
God,
very
that's so cool.
Yeah. So it was kind of something that I explored by accident. But I do think that we all, again, it's another thing that we all have access to. But like you were saying with the listener who asked about protection around readings, I think it's something to not take lightly, to put protection. I always do like a grounding cord back to like the earth plane to my body here. Yeah.
Right. And you would teach all this in the course?
Yeah. So I definitely talk about like different.
So it's for very beginners.
Yeah. So it's totally. And it's like very like working with tarot, and then how that opens up doors to intuition and in other ways, and how, and definitely like how we can work with our intuition in other areas of our life based on kind of like using tarot as a portal to access that more deeply.
Right. That's so cool. That's so exciting. So last question for real this time. What do you have a book suggestion for anybody listening who's who wants to look into this as a beginner?
Yeah. I would say I love Sasha Graham. She has written many books on the tarot. And if you like, it'll give you, even if you just look up Sasha Graham, my go-to with her, I think it's the complete Llewellyn's Complete Guide to the Rider-Waite-Smith, which is like the most famous common tarot deck. And it breaks it down by everything from numerology, astrology, to like the traditional meanings of the cards. So you can kind of see what parts of that you're most interested in. So if you're more astrologically inclined, if you're more like numerologically, or if you're more like, oh, I just want to learn like the images of the cards, it's kind of like that's like a textbook. Like if we were at Hogwarts, I would say like that's the first textbook you should have if you're interested in tarot. And she has many other books that are amazing. She's a friend of mine from New York and very like well respected as you know, in the tarot industry. She has another one that's like 365 like tarot spells. So each day like pull like a card and the intentions around that, so you can move through a year of learning the deck, which I thought was really cool. That's one I gift people a lot. And it's cool because you can either do day by day, or you can look up like today I'm working with like abundance block, so I want to work with this card and kind of this intention or this spell around it. That's a great one. But she has Sasha Graham, like I always am like she's the queen of, in terms of like learning textbooks, ways to work with the tarot. She's great.
And you have your own book that you mentioned.
So mine is coming out the end of 22, and it's half memoir and half spell book. So it's kind of like how I went from fashion bitch to wellness witch, kind of like the
very, is that the title?
Well, it's going to be, I think it's working title, I'll say it, but it's going to be called the Saturn Diaries, because it started with my Saturn return. So like the Saturn Diaries, and then like the subline being a modern day grimoire, which is like modern day spell book, because it was a lot of the kind of like Sex in the City, like how my life was, but then the things that I navigated like through the breakdown, the breakthrough tools that I used, whether it was like tarot cards, herbology, like little elixirs and tinctures that I was creating to help heal, and kind of things that I kept note of. That so partially like the the spell book in that part of it, and then partially like the story of how I went from like fashion bitch to wellness witch. So that I
love that. You need to put that somewhere in there. That's genius.
So you can read it two ways, where if you want to read the story as kind of a memoir, but then you could also reference it just as a spell book of like, oh cool, like I'm struggling with intuition and I want to make a latte that activates your third eye. So like there's like a latte that I created that cinnamon's very like third eye activating.
No wonder.
Yeah, totally. So it's like cinnamon, nutmeg, all these different ingredients that I created for that one, and different little tools and kind of like tips throughout as someone who is awakening on their intuitive journey. So I wanted to create it that it could be used two ways. And I mean, hopefully everyone reads all of it, but I'm like, that way you can use it either way as like a quick reference book, or like to read the story throughout.
I'm so excited. Will you come back?
Yes. Oh my gosh, of course.
Oh my God. That's going to be so cool. But at the end of 22, you said.
Yeah.
So
yeah. I'm
halfway. Got time.
Yeah. I'm halfway through now. And so I finally, I'm so excited. I found the right partner to work with it, as you know. So I'm really excited to get this finished.
It's going to be a hit, because between you and the person that you found, which we both love.
Yes, like she's amazing. Yes.
So Tabitha, shout out to Tabitha.
Yes, Tabitha. So grateful for her, for both of you. I felt like I've quickly found such community in Miami, and it's like that's when you also know you're being guided on the right path. Was like meeting Tabitha, meeting you, and like I came here not knowing that many people. I have a couple friends who have since moved from New York, but I was just like, I'm just gonna do it. And
you were like one of the first in your group to break that seal.
Yes. Yeah.
I can't imagine. I mean, I did it, but I was a child when I moved here.
Yeah.
So it was different, because it was like, I grew up with being indoctrinated, like, we are moving to the United States.
Right.
So it was like, okay, well,
like,
we're here now.
Yeah, totally.
Done. So much they gave me an American name.
Yeah.
Like, you know what I mean? So, I guess I don't really know, you know what I mean? Just having to uproot yourself like that and come to a new place. But I'm so happy that you did.
I'm so happy. I love it here so much. Yeah.
I'm so happy. Miami gets a lot of bad rap, but it's, people like you coming here. And,
oh my gosh. I am such a fan.
Showcasing that we're not all like flip-flop wearing, crazy,
no,
like
it's the
bad
best.
drivers.
Oh my gosh. No, you guys are the best. And I'm so grateful to be here. And I think the people in Miami are like so kind, so open. So I've had nothing but positive experiences. And I keep saying, I like half I'm like, I wish I had moved sooner. But as I say, everything's guided on this journey. So I probably needed to experience a lot of the things, and so that I wasn't allowed to come until 2021 in my contracts. But I'm so grateful to be here now. I'm like, oh, like it's so, yeah, it's a beautiful place. Like, you know, in terms of the weather, the beaches, but the people are really amazing. And I love Miami. So huge fan.
Me too.
I feel like I'm going to be here for the long haul. So yes. Yeah.
And we're happy to have you. I mean, I say it like if I own the city. But
you should.
As a person that lives here, I can say I'm very happy too that you're here.
Yes.
And, you know, you and Catherine and Tabitha, like I'm so happy that Miami's attracting people like you ladies that are just enriching the community.
I love it
with
so
everything
much.
that you're doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting. Well, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us and being so open and answering my bajillion questions.
No, I loved it. I was like, you make me think. I was like, oh, wow, this was good. This was so good.
Thank you. I was listening to, so, and we'll have all these linked, of course.
Yeah.
But your podcast, you know, it's such a wealth of information. So I was trying to make sure I wasn't repetitive. And
no, that was amazing.
I'll make you talk about things that you've already talked about a million times, but there were just questions I couldn't get away from.
No, I love it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And to everybody listening, thank you again for being with us. And I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Bexs information, which...
Oh, yeah. I'm at Cardsy B on Instagram, CARDSYB. And then my podcast is Hex in the City.
Was it such a cool name? Oh my goodness. When I saw it, I was like, of course, it's perfect. Like, of course. So yes, we will link all of that below so they can reach out to you. And you can dive into Miami clientele a little more.
Yes, I'm excited for that, 100%.
All the crazy Hispanics.
I love it. I love it.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.